Hi, this is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. Welcome. All right, 2018 study guide. It is time to review the 2018 study guide. The brand new materials just come out, and so what I want to do today is to go over the CDFM module 1.2, which is still called Manpower Management when you compare to the 2013 study guide. But I want to still go through to see if there are any major changes from what we studied before. So this is the 2018 study guide, section module 1.2, Manpower Management. So let us begin. So on page 5, it talks about the mission of the Department of Defense. So remember, the reason that we're in business and a day-to-day operation on a military installation is not just to operate for the sake of operating. It all falls back to the DoD's mission, which is to provide the forces necessary to defend our country, whether locally or sometimes we're required to go overseas, because it's all about providing safety and security for the country. Let's see what else we have. So you have the 3 military departments, which makes up Army, Navy, and Air Force. And then you have 4 armed services, Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Marine Corps. And you have 19 defense agencies. So all of those agencies and military departments together make up the Department of Defense. And then you have the defense staff. So everything that is done, to include manpower, which on page 6 talks about the definition of manpower. You can't do anything unless you have people to do it. So manpower management is the process that the DoD uses to determine the manpower requirements. How many people do we need to accomplish a particular task? So that's the process that is used, manpower management, and how to make sure that we have the right mix of people where they are needed at the time they're needed. Manpower management. So ensure that you understand the various manpower management terminologies, such as actual strength, assigned, authorized strength, and average. So whenever you see a chart, such as listed on page 128, that's a possibility of, let's say, a test question may be to jumble all of those, the terms and the definition, and then you have to match them. So make sure that you know what these are. So one of the definition of the terms that I want to point out that comes up quite often in the study guide is the Future Year Defense Program, the FYDP. That is the DoD's official database that keeps track of all the processes, all the resources, all the manpower necessary to accomplish a particular mission. So FYDP, FYDP, Future Year Defense Program, all the same thing, is the DoD. That's the only time I can think of that it uses the word DoD database. So remember that, because you'll see it again in Module 2 and in Module 3, because the FYDP is that official. So everything that resource management-wise that is done within the DoD is captured in the Future Year Defense Program. So make sure you know those terminologies. So we talk about mobilization. You have forces that come in when either a crisis or war kicks off. So that's your mobilized forces. And then on page 11, the president has a certain amount of authority to call up forces. So this page is essential because you need to know what law. So first of all, it's covered under Title 10 U.S. Code. So that tells you that's a section 12304. So Title 10 governs your armed forces, typically your active duty forces and your reserve forces. And Title 32 is your National Guard. If you're a civilian, DoD civilian, you're covered under Title V. So those are the three titles you need to know. Title V deals with your DA civilians. Title 10 deals with your active duty and reserve. Title 32 deals with your National Guard personnel. So what does it say the president's authority is on the Title 10 U.S. Code 12304? That should be easy to remember, 12304. When the president determines it necessary, and typically is if the president deems it necessary in the situations where there's weapons of mass destruction or a threat of weapon of mass destruction, the president can call up some forces. So the significance of this law with the presidential authority to call up the forces is that the president does not have to go to Congress to get permission first if you have weapons of mass destruction or threatened weapons of mass destruction. And remember, one of the functions of Congress is to declare war. That means to activate forces. But here you have a special authority that the president has to call up forces. He can do so for no more than 365 days. And then the second part of it, it says no more than 200,000 members of the selective reserve and the individual ready reserve may be put on active duty at the same time, of which, of that 200,000, no more than 30,000 may be in the individual ready reserve. So let me repeat that again. So the president has the authority under Title 10 U.S. Code 12304 to activate forces in situations where there is operational mission or emergency situation, threatened weapon mass destruction or actual use of weapon of mass destruction, a terrorist attack. He can call up these forces from the selective reserve and individual ready reserve. No more than a total of 200,000 can be from those two categories. And of that 200,000, no more than 30,000 can be from the individual ready reserve. So that's the presidential authority to activate reserved forces. So the various categories of civilian employees during crisis situation: mission essential, emergency essential, non-combat. Again, more definitions for you to learn. An important page is page 13, 1213, because it talks about the full-time equivalent terminologies. Just like the other terminologies for manpower, you need to know these. The extra step with these full-time, the FTE terminology, is you need to know how to do these calculations. So if you're asked to calculate the turnover rate, you need to know it takes the number of positions open divided by, the number of people that left divided by your total positions. That will give you your turnover rate. So make sure you know how to do these calculations, because you will be required to calculate FTE, full-time permanent, turnover rate, fill rate, and so forth. Separation incentives. So what are some of the things if the government or the DoD wants you to separate, they're trying to get people out, sometimes they'll pay you and give you an incentive to get out. So the separation incentives include, again, Title V automatically tells me that they're talking about DA civilians, not the military in uniform. They're talking about DA civilian, because the military, again, Title 10, or if it's National Guard, it's Title 32. So you have two categories. You have the buyouts of up to 40,000. So let's look at these first. The buyout program is the voluntary separation incentive pay, and the program for early retirement is known as voluntary early retirement authority. If you look at the dollar threshold, so Department of Defense is permitted no more than 25,000 buyout separations a year. So that's the limitation that they have under this authority. Another limitation on the Title V U.S. Code 9902 requires that the buyout payments the lesser of 40,000. So I can't pay you no more than 40,000. So whichever is less, or the amount of the employee's severance pay. If we're asking the employee to leave, we calculate their severance pay. If it's less than 40,000, then I'm going to pay you that lesser amount. If it's more than 40,000, all I'm going to pay you is 40,000. So that tells me that the highest amount of money you can get for the buyout is 40,000. An employee accepting a buyout cannot be re-employed by the DoD for 12 months after you receive that money. So once you receive a buyout, you get your 30,000, you can stay out for 12 months. And if you decide, hey, I want to go back to work and somebody will hire you, then it's saying that you can go back to work after that 12-month has concluded. All right, the next topic is the Federal Activities Inventory Reform Act of 1998. So when you talk about the contractor versus government, you got to compare those. There are some functions that are inherently governmental, meaning that the government will keep control of that action, that requirement, that mission. So that's what it's talking about. So a list is required not later than the end of the third quarter. Each organization must submit to the director of OMB, Office of Management and Budget. And you ask yourself, what does OMB stand for? Because you see here, all they're using is the acronym. The expectation is that you already know what OMB stands for. Office of Management and Budget, a list of activities performed by the federal government that are inherently governmental, and a list that is being done by a contractor. So we got to keep track of those things. So the OMB review. So how often again is that list required by each agency to turn into OMB? At the end of the third quarter of every fiscal year, the head of the agency must submit that to OMB. So that's on page 15. Okay, got some more information you can read through. All right, OMB Circular A76. So OMB Circular, that means like if you get guidance from the DoD, it comes in a DoDI, a DoD or DoD instruction. Whenever you get policies from Office of Management and Budget, which is the resource manager for the executive branch or the president, then it comes in an OMB circular. A76 deals with commercial activity. That's when you decide if it's more cost beneficial to keep the government doing the function or to get a contractor to do that particular function. So there are two categories when you deal with A76: commercial activity, which is your contractor, and inherently governmental activity. Is that one that is so intimately related to the public interest as to mandate performance by federal employees. So only federal employees will work in the inherently governmental activity. Inherently governmental functions fall into two categories: the act of governing and monetary transactions and entitlements. So the act of governing, the discretionary exercise of government authority, it gives you your CID folks, criminal investigators, prosecutors. Act of governing, their leadership roles, those in your jail, your judicial folks, the courts, or monetary transactions and entitlements. Example includes your tax collection, your revenue, your disbursement folks, control of the treasury. So the following is an illustrative list considered to be inherently governmental functions, and they give you some of the functions that will always be inherently governmental. Page 19 talks about the functions of the OMB Circular. And let me see, I think it's the next page, next couple of pages where it goes into that process, which is mainly, again, to be successful on these exams is to understand the process. So I don't spend a lot of time going through just information because you can read that on your own. You have to be able to understand the process being involved, who does what, when they do it, and then understand how each item relates to the other. So I'm going to jump to page 21, where it gives you the key terms when you deal with OMB Circular A76. So whenever you hear A76, you know that we're talking about commercial activity versus inherently governmental. So conversion to contract, I'll have a civilian run. I want to, or inherently governmental, I want to have a contract to do it. So you can read through those. The one I want to point out is the MEO, most efficient organization. That is the term that is used to describe the government structure, the in-house government structure necessary to do a particular job. That's the MEO. The diagram on page 22 shows you the process that is used to do a cost competition. So what's being done here is when you're trying to decide whether you keep it in-house or you get a contractor, well, there's a systematic process that is used to do that. And so before these studies begin, it's typically generated from request notification to Congress. Then Congress says, okay, you can go ahead and do it. So these are usually because it deals with money and you have to get the funding approved from Congress. You have to notify Congress before you start the study. After things are done and a decision is made, you have to let them know the decision that is made. So the management study and the diagram request the study contract. So you have a contract that is used to study and to look at the performance work statement to build the most efficient organization. So when you start the study, two things happen. You have the in-house structure being developed, the MEO, and then you also do the contract competitive with the performance work statement. So remember, your performance work statement is that document that lists all the tasks, every single task that that contract needs to be able to do to be successful, at that mission. So your MEO then is developed. You do complete an independent cost review. You also at the same time send out the performance work statement to get bids from different contractors. So at the end, you have a cost for the MEO and a cost for the contractors. And then a cost comparison is done to decide, okay, which one is it because it's cheaper? How much cheaper? What are the criteria being used to do the cost comparison? Of course, you always have an appeal process, because whenever a decision is made, there's always an appeal process. And then once that final decision is made, a notification goes back to Congress. When Congress agrees with that contract, either the contract is awarded or that most efficient organization is implemented. Because you may have to get your TDA or your manning documents changed because the MEO may not currently have all the resources necessary. So that's the MEO implemented doesn't mean, oh, I already have everybody in place in-house to do the job. It may also mean that I have new positions, new requirements that come out of this process. So again, your performance work statement details all the specific technical concerns, technical requirements for that. Now, the key, remember when I started with the A76, I said that Congress has to be notified. Well, when do you need to notify? Just because I'm doing a study, I need to let Congress know? No, not so. If you look on page 25, where it talks about the official A76 announcement and notification there, it tells you congressional notification. Congress is notified if you're talking about if it involves 46 or more DoD civilians, their jobs. Because again, if you decide to go to a contractor, those people in those jobs will be affected, those DA civilians. So if it includes 46 or more government personnel, civilian personnel, then Congress has to be notified before you even start that study. So make sure you point that out there. So let me put that so I don't miss that next time. All right, for several years. Okay, more words. Ethics. All right, so we're switching gears. We're talking about contractor. We're talking about government. So ethics or ethical rules tells us some do's and don'ts. What gifts we can accept from outside sources, gifts we can accept internally amongst ourselves. What does the regulation say about our ethical requirements? So on page 27, it has some basic ones. If it's gift from outside, so sometimes you have contractors or vendors that work for your organization, and they have, let's say they give you a pen. Okay, that's a gift. Well, the limitation is where the value of the gift is $20 or less, I can take it from that one vendor. I cannot accept a total of $50, anything more than $50. So let's say annually. Let's say that vendor comes back to my organization and they give me a couple more pens. So now that's total to, if they give me a couple more, that's what, $40 more. So now I have $60 worth of pen. What this regulation is saying, no, ethically, I cannot accept any gift from that one vendor that exceeds a $50 price tag for a year total for those gifts. If the gift is based solely on a family relationship or personal, so those are exceptions. Where the gift is based on outside relations, because sometimes just because you may be the government employee and you have a contractor relationship outside of work that you had before you all started working together, there are exceptions. Again, if you're not comfortable with accepting the gift and you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing, consult your local legal personnel. Gifts between employees, just remember $10. You know, like sometimes they come around and say, hey, we're collecting money if you would like to donate. The limit on donations is $10 per employee. For food and refreshment shared in the office, we can on occasional, we can contribute to that towards gifts. It's just saying for cash, the limit on cash is $10. Some other limitation, employees may solicit or contribute on a strictly voluntary basis. So nobody can make you donate. They will say, hey, if you would like to donate, please feel free. Regardless of the number of DoD employees contributing towards the gift, let's say you have a senior person, a director, or a general leaving. Sometimes we want to get them the bigger gift. Their gifts cost more than what we would normally get a regular employee. So let's say it's $300. So if the market value an aggregate of $300, and if the DoD employees knows for any reason that any member of the donating group is their subordinate, the $10 limitation still stands. So it's $10 regardless of who you're donating to. It's not the value of the gift. It's the number of people who are giving and the limits on them to give. So I don't want to beat that up to death. All right, what do we have? Financial disclosure. More information that you can read through on your own. Misuse of position. Let's say honoraria is another key area on page 33 that we don't talk quite much about. So let's say, okay, I graduated from the University of South Carolina and I am in the military in uniform doing a particular function. Let's say the university calls me to come and speak to a class about my journey since I graduated from that university. And they offer to pay me. Can I accept the payment? Honoraria, and when you got to read through that, it's saying depending on the role that you're going for. If I'm going in my official capacity as Colonel so-and-so or Sergeant so-and-so, then I cannot accept payment. If I'm going on the role of, hey, I am an alumni of this organization and I'm going to speak solely on my experiences after graduation, then I can't accept payment. So again, consult your legal if you're not comfortable with these rules, because you can't just be, hey, I'm going in my official capacity and the individual pay you and you accept the money. You're getting paid twice, because the government's paying you for your work, and then you go to that civilian organization for them to pay you also. So it doesn't work that way. So post-employment, one of those other, it's not really a gray area. It's pretty straightforward, but you got to be careful. Let's say you're working for the government today, and you communicate, you intertwine, you work with a contractor to conduct business with the government. And then you leave the government and you are being solicited by that organization, that contractor, to work with them. If you read through, it says there's a waiting period, cooling off period. You should wait at least 1 year from separating from the government before you start working with that contractor that you were directly working with already in your government capacity. So make sure you remember the cool off period post-employment on 33 is 1 year. And let's see, finally, so we talked about you can't supplement your salary using your official capacity. You can't supplement representation of government agencies in court. If you are on TDY, temporary duty travel, and you go park your vehicle illegally, you can't expect and then settle that in your travel voucher because, hey, I was TDY and this happened. So depending on the role you're in and what you're doing, if you are doing the right things in the right places and then things happen, then you are covered. You will be represented by the government. But if you are illegally parked, you get the government vehicle towed, you're going to be responsible for that cost. So those are some of the things when it deals with manpower management, is understanding that process, the key terms, the definition, who's governed under what title, Title 5, Title 10 versus Title 32. Even though it's not directly stated here, it's expected for you to know. And Office of Management and Budget, that's the senior forum. Again, remember your chain of command, your hierarchy. DoD reports to OMB, Office of Management and Budget. And so we get our policy guidance from the OMB. So be sure to make sure that you subscribe, leave a comment, or even share the link to these videos to help someone else achieve their Certified Defense Financial Management exam certification. Thank you, and I'll see you again next time.